For the most part, the most terrifying villains to ever grace the movie screen belong to the realm of horror. Dracula, Pennywise, the Predator, that frickin' bear thing from Annihilation. Of course, not everybody is a fan of the horror genre, and for this reason, some people do everything in their power to avoid watching anything centered around serial killers, demons, or monsters. But every once in a while, a horror-worthy villain will creep its way into another genre altogether. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are the 10 most terrifying villains in non-horror movies. Number 10. Colonel Oats, the Easter Bunny, and Granny Preston, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. In Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, the air guitar-loving duo must once again secure humanity's future. This time, rather than travelling through time, the two great ones must venture into the afterlife. And as hard as it is to believe, this wacky comedy has one of the most disturbing depictions of hell. After Bill and Ted are banished to the underworld, they are forced to experience nightmarish scenarios. In the first scenario, an army colonel orders the pair to perform infinity push-ups. Then, when they escape, the two find themselves reliving a warped version of their most traumatic memories. In Bill's memory, his great-grandmother tries kissing him while flashing her rotten teeth. While in Ted's memory, he's chastised by the Easter Bunny after stealing his brother's Easter eggs. It sounds silly out of context, but these sequences prey on childlike fears, making them far creepier. The wonky camera angles, disproportionate backdrops, and strategically placed cameras make the antagonists look more formidable than they are. The fact that Bill and Ted revert to children in these scenes intensifies the danger, since they're too helpless to defend themselves. Even though Bill and Ted encounter the devil himself during their hellish jaunt, this trio of horrors is far more ghastly. Number 9. The Terror Dogs, Ghostbusters. 4 decades after its release, Ghostbusters remains one of the most quintessential comedies of all time. Thanks to the cast's sizzling chemistry, the quotable script, and impeccable line delivery, Ivan Reitman's magnum opus is a laugh-a-minute classic. Due to the supernatural premise, it's no surprise Ghostbusters has its fair share of horror elements. But as the first scene proves, these paranormal sequences are played up for laughs. However, it's a totally different story when the demonic terror dogs show up with the intent to possess human hosts, hoping to use their bodies to bring about the apocalypse. Not only do the malevolent mutts look horrifying in their own right, they're introduced with an ominous score, amplifying the tension exponentially. They only appear for a few seconds at a time, but make every moment count. Also, the abject terror on the actors' faces, especially from Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis, sell how dangerous these devilish doggies are. Though Ghostbusters is a comedy above all else, anyone who was spooked by the terror dogs shouldn't be judged too harshly. Number 8. Molar Ram, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. After the success of Raiders of the Lost Ark, it was no surprise to learn Indiana Jones would return in another adventure, although technically a previous adventure since the Temple of Doom is actually a prequel. This time around, Harrison Ford's character heads to an Indian village where he learns the children have been forced into slave labor at a nearby temple. Upon investigation, Indy discovers the operation is run by Molar Ram, a high priest who hopes to unearth the sacred Sankara stones from the temple and use their power to rule the world. Temple of Doom has plenty of bone-chilling visuals, but the one that sticks out most is of Molar Ram ripping out his victim's beating heart before incinerating him in lava. As the heart bursts into flame, Molar then lets out a maniacal cackle. Even though Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers freaked out millions of moviegoers, Molar Ram has a greater distinction, as this deranged cult leader was so scary that he's partially responsible for movie censorship being tightened. Since this PG-rated blockbuster was considered too violent and potentially scarring for children, it led to the creation of the PG-13/12A rating. Number 7. The Dementors, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. During the events of The Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry Potter had already rescued his friends countless times, destroyed the wicked basilisk, and defeated Voldemort twice. Since the Dark Lord took a break from pestering Harry this time around, our bespectacled hero should have it easy this year. Instead, Harry encounters a force that's arguably more chilling than Voldemort. Before arriving in Hogwarts, Harry learns there's a manhunt for an escaped prisoner called Sirius Black. Hoping to find Sirius, the area is patrolled by gliding wraiths called Dementors. Although the Dementors have a suitably eerie look, it's their behaviour that earns them a place on this list. Rather than attacking their victims directly, the 12-foot-tall phantoms feed on human happiness, paralysing anybody in their proximity with an overwhelming sense of depression. This feeling can be so overbearing, it causes most people to faint after a few seconds, which Harry proves upon his first encounter with the cloaked creatures. And if a Dementor gorges on their prey's emotions for too long, they'll be reduced to a vegetative state, unable to feel happiness ever again. After spending a moment with these heinous entities, Voldemort doesn't sound too bad, does he? Number 6. The Horned King, the Black Cauldron. Despite being dubbed a failure at the time, the Black Cauldron might have Disney's most teeth-chattering villain. The story follows medieval warrior Taran, who's tasked with finding an enchanted cauldron before it falls into the clutches of the Horned King. Even though most Disney baddies have a comedic tone, there's nothing humorous about this demonic sorcerer whatsoever, thanks to his rotting flesh, glowing red eyes, and skeletal body. The Horned King is so effortlessly intimidating. He doesn't need to do anything to leave an impact. When he first appears, the sound and light are sucked out of the room, highlighting the immeasurable power he wields. His lackeys go silent when he's near, knowing the next thing they say could incur his wrath. Bizarrely, the most spine-tingling thing the Horned King does is die. During the climax, he becomes consumed by the Black Cauldron's power, tearing him apart. Since this is supposedly a kids' film, the evil warlock's demise could have been quick and painless. Instead, the Horned King is ripped to shreds for a full 20 seconds until he's reduced to a wailing skeleton. After watching this sequence, it's no surprise why Disney delayed the Black Cauldron's video release for over a decade. Number 5. The Grand High Witch, the Witches. Roald Dahl's work is filled with many hideous antagonists, including flesh-eating giants, tyrannical principals, and insidious aliens. However, it's unlikely any of Dahl's creations have spawned more anxiety than Angelica Houston's Grand High Witch from The Witches. Houston is so gleefully nasty in the role, she's sure to leave anybody feeling uneasy even if she remained in her human disguise for the entire movie, though the character cranks up the fear factor when she does finally unveil her true form. After taking off her costume, the Grand High Witch is revealed to be a hook-nosed crone with hairy warts, sagging flesh, elongated fingers, and lumpy skin. Just when it looks like the sorceress couldn't be more unsettling, she incinerates one of her fellow witches to ash. Despite being best remembered for her hideous appearance, there are subtler aspects of the Grand High Witch worth mentioning. For example, early on, it's mentioned that witches enjoy trapping children in paintings. At one point, the Grand High Witch can be seen giddily tapping a painting of a child, causing it to squeak. Although the idea of being turned into a mouse or lasered to death by a witch is alarming, being imprisoned inside a painting with no means of escape is a fate worse than death, let's be honest. Number 4. The Banshee, Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Darby O'Gill and the Little People is mainly known for 3 reasons. Firstly, it's directly responsible for popularising Irish folklore, especially surrounding leprechauns. Secondly, it stars a pre-fame Sean Connery, and most importantly, the 60s classic was pure nightmare fuel back in its day. The bulk of the story focuses on an old codger, Darby, trying to outwit a leprechaun. As such, the Disney flick comes across as a wondrous children's tale for the most part. But when Darby's daughter grows gravely ill, the titular character finds himself being hounded by a wailing ghost called the Banshee. Although the Banshee has a creepy design and a piercing cry, it's what she represents that gets the goosebumps going. Anybody who hears the Phantom's ear-splitting cry is doomed to lose somebody they love. As soon as Darby heard the Banshee's wail, he knew his child was doomed. Fortunately, Darby makes a deal to spare his daughter's soul, allowing everyone to live happily ever after. Nevertheless, anyone who watched Darby O'Gill and the Little People as a kid should feel a shiver down their spine whenever they remember this deathly spirit. Number 3. The Nothing, the Never-Ending Story. It's hard to find one person who doesn't love The Never-Ending Story. except perhaps the original author who detested the film adaptation of his 1979 novel. Although few children walked away from this 80s classic without suffering an existential crisis. The movie kicks off with reclusive kid Bastien, whose life changes forever after discovering a novel called The Never-Ending Story. The book centers around a warrior called Atreyu, who must save the magical world of Fantasia from the Nothing, a dark power that erases everyone and everything from reality. Since the Nothing isn't a physical entity, Atreyu is unable to fight it, allowing the malevolent force to swallow up everyone and everything he has ever known before ultimately destroying the world. Somehow, that's not the scariest part. Atreyu discovers the Nothing is the manifestation of humanity's dwindling imagination. Since people in Bastien's reality no longer follow their dreams, it's caused Fantasia to decay. Bastien also learns the characters in this so-called storybook are real, meaning he must bring creativity back to his world to keep them alive. Although Atreyu and Bastien successfully return Fantasia to normal, the Nothing may leave young viewers questioning their own existence for the first time in their lives. Number 2. Darkness Legend. Ridley Scott's Legend may not have won over critics, but it has since become a cult classic. Despite coming across as a generic good versus evil fairy tale at first, Legend becomes dramatically more entertaining and terrifying when Tim Curry's Lord of Darkness pops on screen. The Horned Fiend intends to return the world to perpetual darkness, allowing him to rule supreme. If another actor played the role, Darkness could have come across as a campy fantasy villain due to his over-the-top appearance and paper-thin backstory. But Curry commands the character with such unquenchable ferocity. Darkness feels like he was meant to be a horror villain that was repurposed for this movie. Though Darkness's design is iconic, it's how Curry plays the role with such delightful relish that makes it work. Not only that, Darkness is prone to unexpected mood swings, which are genuinely startling. One moment, he's wooing a woman like a poet, the next he's unleashing an animalistic tantrum, each utterance layered with seduction and wicked exuberance, which is sure to leave anyone enthralled and unnerved. Legend has a couple of frightening characters, including Blix and Meg Mucklebones, but nobody inspires bedwetting terror like the Lord of Darkness. Number 1. The Beldum, Coraline. There are few films less deserving of the family-friendly mantle than Henry Selick's Coraline. This Neil Gaiman adaptation feels like it was designed not to entertain, but to traumatize. Although the stop-motion feature has a creepy atmosphere throughout, it's the big bad that leaves the biggest impression. While exploring her new home, the titular teenager discovers a passageway to a house identical to hers, a house inhabited by a button-eyed replica of Coraline's mum called Other Mother. This doppelganger is so cheery, Coraline considers staying in this reality for good. Over time, Coraline discovers Other Mother is actually a wicked entity called the Beldum, who takes on a friendly appearance to lure children into her realm. In itself, that sounds pretty scary, but that's not all, as the Beldum sends dolls to the real world to spy on potential victims. Once kids enter her dimension, the Beldum replaces their eyeballs with buttons. When the time comes, she devours their flesh and steals their souls, preventing them from moving on to the afterlife. When Coraline defies the Beldum, she transforms into a skeletal spider creature made of needles. At a certain point, viewers may wonder if the creators picked up a horror script by accident and tried their damnedest to turn it into a kids' flick. Coraline is so nerve-wracking, it makes innocuous things like dolls, needles, and buttons really spooky. It may be classified as dark fantasy, but Coraline should be deemed a horror purely because of the Beldum.